Rosenlund with the Center for Italian Culture at Fitchburg State College. It's Friday, January 25th, 2002. We're at the offices of Attilio and Robert Antonioni, 42 Main Street in Leominster. So I just need both of you to just tell me your names, just so I can...
Attilio Antonioni.
Robert A. Okay. Robert A. Antonioni.
Sure. Okay. Usually I interview people closer and then back to you. I was telling your father that I've interviewed a lot of people in your family.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I got a lot of the history from your brother as far as your mother and the restaurant business, and I thought it would be interesting if you could just tell me your memories of that, not necessarily dates, because I really have that, but just your memory of her opening the restaurants and cooking. I believe she began with pizza.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, she did prepare pizza for the various people at the DuPont facility that was in back of us down there on Lancaster Street. Yeah, good business to get into. We used to drive through the center of Leominster at night, and there was always a line outside there, and she always felt that if they could do it, she could do it. And so they did. They opened a restaurant down there on Lancaster Street, the Lazy A. But it was lazy because they worked very long hours. But we did have the restaurant there. That was when I started college at Holy Cross. We used to commute to school each day and then worked in the restaurant at night. My brother and I used to alternate nights there working in the restaurant. Everything. We were chief cook and bottle washers. We would help cook the food, prepare it, clean up. Anything that's done in a restaurant, we did it.
I guess it's important to know there a reason for that.
The long hours is enough to discourage anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Then we did that one a number of years there, and until my folks retired. But they were out of the business for 5 years or so, and my mother was always itching to get back in, so they built the El Camino restaurant down on Central Street. Sold the Lazy A, which is now known as the Gondola. Sold it to, and the same people own the El Camino that we sold it to. So it was extremely important to my mother. Unfortunately, she had to leave school early and go to work, and she was just 12 or 13. Felt that education was extremely important, so that it was determined that we were going to go to school. There was no question about it.
An idea of when you were in high school, what would a day be like if, well, actually, she didn't open up the Lazy A until you were in college? Is that what you said?
Until I graduated from high school, and the Lazy A was opened, I think, in the spring of 1948. Prior to that time, however, father used to work at the DuPont, and he would work the 4 to 12 shift, mainly because that paid a little more. And at that time, she was also cooking pizzas at home that we would deliver to the cafeteria at the Foster Grant Company. And so before I went to school in the morning, we would deliver pizzas there to Foster Grant and then go to school.
When would you study?
Oh, in the afternoon and evenings. Well, I worked in the afternoon. I worked at the A&P, so we worked every afternoon then. But at night, we would study. Nobody was always important to my folks, and we did.
Now, is it only you and your brother in the family?
No, I have two sisters. Margaret's husband owned the Valeria Insurance Agency. He passed away several years ago, and she sold it after that. And my sister Jeannie is 5 years or so, 30 years, doing accounting work for them.
What was life like as a child? Can you tell me about the neighborhood that you lived in?
It was a good neighborhood. Life, I think, was much better for us than for many other families. My mother was an extremely hard worker. She knew how to stretch things considerably so that because I recall going to school during the Depression there. There were many other children that weren't well dressed as well as they could be and so forth, but we always had decent clothes. My mother made a lot of them. We lived on Longwood Avenue at the time. We had a large yard there, and we always had a large vegetable garden. There were fruit trees there, and my mother would can all types of vegetables and fruits and things of that nature. So actually, I always thought lived very well as compared to a lot.
So when you would work in the afternoon, were you expected to put, let's say, the money on the table?
Oh yes, the money was turned over to my folks. We got spending money, of course, but no, we turned the money. It was saved, and and so forth. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were never using it for daily expenses. I'm sure of that. Mm-hmm. I mean, they didn't confide in us as to where everything went, but they had to have saved money in order to send us to school.
What kinds of leisure activities were you involved in?
In those days, you did a lot of visiting, obviously, because you didn't have any television. There was visiting with relatives and friends and playing with other children and so forth. And my father's club had an outing every year at Simon Park up in Fitchburg, which was a big event and so forth. We'd go on picnics. We went on many a picnic at Coggshall Park. They were very enjoyable. But mainly it was visiting with relatives and friends.
Were you living in a predominantly Italian neighborhood?
Oh no, we used to call it the League of Nations. There were Italian people there, but there were Irish, German, French. There was everybody.
At Longwood Avenue?
Yes. So
is it safe to say that you had friends of all ethnic races?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, always somebody around there that, different people. Obviously, most of the relatives, well, all the relatives are all Italian, but friends and so forth were everything. My mother worked at the DuPont previously, and there were a lot of French-speaking women there and so forth, and she learned to speak French working in the factory, so that she could speak.
As children, how did you really identify your differences?
As regard ethnic backgrounds or whatever? I don't think we even thought about it. As I say, there was everybody there. We went out in the street and played, and everybody played, regardless of what your background was. And there weren't any problems.
So there wasn't any tension or dissension?
No.
Tell me about your decision to go to Holy Cross.
Well, my brother was going there, so, little did I know about schools and so forth, but he went there, so I figured that would be a good place to go also. There was a question about whether I was going to be able to afford it and so forth, but they made it.
Now, were you commuting with him and others?
Yes, I had an uncle from Fitchburg, actually, who was you indicated that you had interviewed my Aunt Doris and Aunt Pia. There was my Uncle Charlie Cattell from Fitchburg, and he was going to Holy Cross also. And he had a car, and we commuted. There were other people from Leominster that he would pick up in the morning also, and we'd all drive to Worcester. 80 years after we had the restaurant, and there was a little more money around, and I had a car to drive back and forth in my senior year.
Were you working at this time also?
Oh, yes. In the restaurant, yes. Every other night.
Every other night?
Every other night we worked in the restaurant, yes. Which is studying done during the day at school, during off hours and so forth.
What were Sundays like?
Well, when I was small, it was very enjoyable. There was always the big Sunday meal, and of course everybody would go to church in the morning and come back, and there was the big Sunday dinner, and usually in the afternoon it was lying around, taking it easy, going to visit people, listening to the radio and so forth. In later years, of course, once we had the restaurant, then there was work, because the restaurant was open on Sundays.
Was religion important to your family, your parents?
Absolutely. My mother was extremely religious woman, and we were on a very short leash. We didn't stray very far. No, she was, but as I say, she was watching us all the time and brought up in a very religious manner. Yes.
Were there any gender differences in the family as far as what the boys were expected to do and the girls?
Well, not really, because there were almost two families there. My brother and I, the girls didn't come along until 15 years later or something like that. And so it was just my brother and I, and we grew up doing housework and everything else. We before we had the restaurant, Saturday was house cleaning day, and we did dusting and everything else. And we washed dishes like everybody else. The girls came along at a later time, but by then we restaurant, and that disrupted the so-called family life because we were working. Girls didn't grow up the same way that my brother and I did, because my visiting and so forth. But the restaurant was closed on Mondays, and every Monday they would take the girls.
Was education important for the girls to have
yes.
too?
Yes. My sister Margaret went to Riviera College in New Hampshire, and Jeannie went to Merrimack. She did a very good job with Raytheon. She's been with them a long time. She's almost...
Are you bored yet, just sitting there? So I thought maybe I could ask you about your childhood. First of all, were your grandparents alive?
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
They were. Can you tell me what you remember?
My dad's mother didn't pass away until 1997.
I don't know for some reason. The only thing is, even if you put it there, I'm not sure why this is happening.
Usually on Sundays.
I'm sorry, but I'm trying to get it, if you can
Okay,
tell.
sure.
Close as possible to you. So, never?
Never.
Dad have something to do with that, or?
No, but I could see that the hours there are really long, or very long. But no, it's not something I ever thought about. Up here in town, in Leominster, there were quite a few of us kids there, so it was a busy place. Number of children in the neighborhood too, so it was I'd say we were all pretty much, that's what I remember about that.
Well, in a sense it was, because the Oliviers have a French heritage, and the Bagleys were Irish, and we were Italian. I think there were 22 children in those 4 households, or 5 households. How many?
Oh, that's probably true. I think growing, I think that we didn't think too much about our heritage. That wasn't something that really we focused on different churches, I suppose you could say, but that was it.
Well, in my day, of course, you had most of these first generation. The parents were all immigrants, and obviously they tended to live with other people of their own heritage. As the street area, the French were all congregated in Plains, and then that was only because I think you tended to stay among the people that you knew and were comfortable with, so to speak, because you had many parents that spoke only their ethnic language. My grandmother could speak a little English, but not much. It was mainly Italian, and she had been in this country for many years. She was 99 and a half when she was speaking Italian. And if you go down to down on the hill, with the older people that are still speaking French all the time. So it was just, it isn't like today where everybody's just spread out and is gone everywhere. You tended to stay among the people that you knew and so forth.
Is there still
some of the old timers, but some of the old ones, yes. And my wife delivers communion to elderly and shut-ins and so forth, and there were some of them that only speaks Italian. Prayers in Italian, so that she could say the prayers with them, but so they knew which prayer, not too much.
And did your parents?
Yes, not always. No, not no. It was mainly with them. It was English. but obviously they Italian very well because they were born in Italy and came to this country. But in the home, and most of the time, 90% of the time, they were speaking English. If they visited other people, they would speak Italian to them, depending on who they were. Those days, a lot more people were a lot more comfortable with their native language. So there's not too many of those here. Oh,
Italian.
No. We spoke English all the time. They never spoke Italian in the house to us. They tried to teach us Italian, but Mother bought books and we took lessons and things of that nature. But
yeah, I mean, I think my folks stressed that with us certainly, and would watch very much a factor. Yeah. Well, set an example, I suppose, and just seemed more of a natural fit for me than anything.
Well, there was no really good reason for it. After I graduated from Holy Cross, I went into the service, and when I got out of the service, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and law school. And I said, that might be interesting. So I went to law school, and it was that simple.
No? Mentor?
No, because I didn't even know any lawyers in those days. I didn't know one. Graduated from law school and started working.
That's pretty courageous, I think.
But it's been a good life. I've enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Changed considerably. There's no question about that from the way I used to practice, but it's enjoyable. I think when he was in college, he indicated that he wanted to become a lawyer also, and I to law schools. I have a daughter who is an attorney. She graduated from Salva Regina and in nursing, and she practiced nursing for several years, but then decided she wanted to go to Arlington, and Coco, John was from Bentley, and Christine is Worcester State. All gone to school. So when you talk about education, yes, we felt it was
You're the first Italian in Leominster and Fitchburg to graduate from law school?
No. Oh, no. No, there was, in Leominster, there was James Oliver. He was, when I started, he was up in age then. He was probably in his 60s then. John Fitchburg, Paul San Clemente, number of different Italians as attorneys. Many more so since then, but they're all over the place now.
Mm-hmm. What were Sundays like growing up?
Sundays, everyone was around. It was a family day. We'd usually go to have a big lunch at home. Sometimes we'd have relatives that would visit, or we would go there maybe, I'm guessing, maybe once a month or something. But it was a time that we'd spend at home, really. That was my recollection, that we could play outside. But it was more a family day, to be honest. That's what I remember.
What is Sundays like?
Sundays are a day to relax. You go to church in the morning, probably. Well, we don't do that as much. My wife Priscilla and I will spend the day together because she works in Boston, and we don't see each other until 7, 8 o'clock at night usually. And Saturdays I typically work, or at least half the day. So Sunday we'll probably spend some time together, or maybe take a ride. Or my Uncle Ed was a fellow who was married to my Aunt Margaret. Had been a city councilor, and I think I always knew growing up that politics would be an interesting thing, might be a fun thing to do. I thought that would be something I would try. It would be something I could do on my own. So I decided to run for the Leominster City Council. It was a year or so after I got out of law school. I graduated in '83, and City Council, in, I guess it was '84, because I was elected to Leominster City Council. So it wasn't long after I got out of law school that I ran for office. And then state representative in Leominster, Angelo Pacuzzi, passed away. He'd been there passed away. It was an election year, and I decided to run with a number of other politicians. And I was lucky enough to leave. The Senate seat opened up, and I ran for that too. So that's how. I think that when Angelo Pacuzzi passed away, my Uncle Ed might have said to me, "Gee, you should think about that." And I decided to do it, you know. And he was very helpful to me. I couldn't have done it without him. He had been a reporter in Leominster years earlier, and he always enjoyed politics too. And it actually helped Angelo Pacuzzi when he ran for the seat, 15 or 17 years earlier. Then there was another guy by the name of Chalk Antonucci, who was a firefighter, retired firefighter in town. And between Chalk and Ed, they really helped me out a lot. Either race, they were actually involved in both they were involved in the city council race, the state representative race, and then the Senate race. They were great. Yeah. I think so. I mean, I think that the ethnic factor certainly helped in Leominster, no question, because as my dad said, it's a big Italian, and I think that that is from a politician standpoint, the ethnic vote is still important, and people, particularly who are older, are certainly willing to consider someone of their heritage. The ethnic factor is a big thing, sure, even today.
I remember the incidents and so forth, all the happenings, yes. We were in Leominster at the time, so we didn't take that much into as they would in Fitchburg. Mm-hmm. But in those days, he mentioned Chalk Antonucci, and Chalk became a fireman in a big party down there because Italian going on into the fire department. There weren't many around of them beforehand or something like that. And so it was, police department had a number of Italians. As I say, today, nobody looks at those things anymore. And I think it's for the better, obviously, because it shouldn't make any difference who you are. As long as you're qualified, you should be in these positions. But again, in those days, there were more close-knit groups than there are today.
What it means for you to be Italian?
Part of my identity. It's a connection by, my cousins and, part of your identity. Special thing. It is. It's something that you come. Well, I think I would want my children to appreciate. I think you learn as you get older that there are people that share a different background than you, and you come to appreciate that too. And legislator, you travel around a bit, and you meet a lot of different people from. So you begin to. I think you appreciate the differences in people too that seen otherwise. Mm-hmm. It gives you a broader perspective.
No.
Actually, my wife is half Italian.
Is she?
Yeah, her grandparents, Boston, believe it or not, they were Protestants. Her grandparents were Protestants. When they came over, I think the Protestant community in Boston were very supportive of her grandparents. I imagine at some point they were Catholic in Italy, but that's just the way it was. And her grandfather was an Italian lawyer in Boston. And she's very proud of that. She's an attorney, too.
So, not moving back to Leominster?
Well, I think that being in politics, no, really, because when I graduated from law school, it was my intention to come back and work with my dad. So I intended on living here. But now, being in politics and serving this area, Leominster, I expect that I'll continue to live in Leominster or the surrounding communities, one of the surrounding communities. Sure.
So I'd like to continue with...
Leominster, of course, has grown considerably. When I was in high school, and there were only about 17,000 people in town, and I remember one brochure describing it as a semi-agrarian community. We still had a lot of farms, though. The entire outlying areas were all farms here. Mm-hmm. Now, 40,000 people now. So the city has grown tremendously. There's no question about that. Mm-hmm. And the law profession, when there were 17 lawyers in town, and there must be 50 now anyway, tremendous increase in the number of attorneys all over the place now. And the law profession itself has changed. In those days, cases and things of that nature. Now, accident case probably take up 10% of the law work. You have so many more fields that have opened up, environmental issues.
How has Leominster changed in just the period of time that you've grown up here and now, as far as ethnic composition, or does it still have a hometown feel to it?
That depends on who you ask. If you ask my wife, she'd tell you that it looks like something out of the 50s, But I think it's changed quite a bit. My dad said it's really grown. And that I've, come back to practice in the last 17 years or so, it's grown dramatically. I think that you've got many people coming from outside the city to live here and work because of its location on Route 2. You got many of the developments that were built up on the farms and the old ski area here in town. They tend to be high-priced homes, at least as this area had known the housing scale. And you've got many people coming who didn't grow up here or really had no connection to Leominster. And that's true, in fact, of the whole area here. There's just a migration west because people looking for affordable housing. Leominster has changed considerably. I still think of it obviously as home, but it's a much busier place. I mean, you can't drive downtown on Saturday without waiting in traffic 10, 15 minutes. Friday afternoons as well, it gets awfully busy. Sign of the times.
Now, I was thinking single out. Did you have aliens coming in to be serviced, or?
No, I never, quite frankly, relied on the Italian community for my livelihood. I'm more Italians. I think one reason for that might be that my mother and father came from Fitchburg, Leominster people. Mm-hmm. So, and at the time that I was starting, Jimmy Oliver was representing all the Italian people in town, and John Longo was. And so that they got the bulk of the Italian trade, so to speak. So there was just regular people, all kinds, coming in for different things. But for the last 25 years or so, I haven't been to court in 20 years now, because all I do is mortgage work for banks and probate work, bills in estates and things of that nature. So that that in itself has limited me. Like I said before, he handles far more different things than I ever did, and obviously won't more because I'm reaching the end of the trail here. I've been around 45 years now. But as I say, with my work, with doing just mortgage work for banks and things like that, I've handled dozens of closings for residential houses, loans, shopping malls, the whole ball of wax. People need this.
So initially when you began, I guess this is progress, all that noise outside, right? Anyway, when you first began business, how did people pay for your services?
Well, I was never one to get paid up front because I knew a lot of the people didn't have a lot of money, and but I never lost a lot. I mean, some bills have gone sour, but I never regretted it, and I never had a real problem with regard to it. what was interesting, you just indicated that the noise of the traffic outside. Well, when I started, we didn't have I-190 or any of the highways, and all the traffic used to come right through town here. Everybody going from Worcester up to New Hampshire or through this entire area, they all use Route 12. And Route 12 goes right through the center of town here. Mm-hmm. And you got the traffic light there, and you got the traffic light there. And it was amazing even those days the number of trucks that you had. And every one of them was stopping here. And I started out across the street there. And I had an office across the street at 39 Main Street. And in the summertime, you had the window open, and it was just trucks. And they stopped for the lights, and they'd rev the motors and so forth. So you had to close the windows in order to try and do anything. So this is nothing compared to what it used to be like.
Now, did you begin by yourself?
No, I started next door in this building over here with Isidore Solomon. Mm-hmm. And I was with him for 5 years, and then I branched off on my own, went across.
What's it like working with your son?
It's good. It's very good. I enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. We don't have any problems. We understand each other. We ask each other for advice and opinions and so forth. And I think the main thing is that it's, we trust each other. And so that when we ask a question, we're getting a truthful answer, for us in our circumstances and so forth. So that, I've enjoyed having him with me tremendously. I don't know what I would have done if he hadn't come here, because I wouldn't have lasted this long, I'm sure of that.
It's been good. It's been very good. If my dad hadn't been an attorney, I don't know what I would have done. I might not have too. And but it's good. I keep telling him that he can retire anytime he wants, although I secretly don't want him to go. But no, it's been very good. It's been a comfortable place to work. I've never really thought of not doing this. The political job has enabled me to do other things, but still allow me to stay here. And never thought of going someplace else. It's a very comfortable place, and we know each other obviously, and been good. It's been good. I'm glad.
What happens when he retires?
I don't know. he promised
me. Be far away.
He promised me he won't. So I don't know. I don't know what I don't. Honest to God, I really haven't thought about it. I keep telling him that, whenever he wants, that's okay. He can do that. But I think my dad, this is like his, it's not only his work, but it's kind of his hobby too, I think. Really, I like to go fishing and stuff. He doesn't fish. So I think this is, I hope they say I'm honest, that I was sensitive to their situation. I guess that's what I would hope they would. I think education seems to have become the real big issue today, at least as I've been there. It's just really grown. It's both in terms of prominence, in terms of the money that we've committed to it. It really is the issue people seem to care most about, followed pretty closely, I would think, by health care. That's how it's changed a lot. People tend to come to us for just about everything. You'd be surprised. The calls that we get from people that are having a problem with the Registry of Motor Vehicles or the Department of Social Services or traffic light, or you'd be amazed at some of the calls we get. And sometimes they won't find me. They'll call my parents' house, looking for me. They call like late in the middle of the night sometimes.
Yeah, 4:45 the other day.
Yeah.
Quarter to 4.
In the morning.
In the morning.
What
Yeah.
happened? a while late or something?
You've got to talk to the senator.
But not at that time.
I think my mother hung up on them, which is pretty unusual for my mother to hang up on anybody.
She said, call the office in the morning, not now.
Right.
Do you realize what time it is? My wife is a much nicer person than I am.
I was friendly with Paul. I always liked him. He had been in the legislature for a long time. We have a number of mutual friends. So I didn't endorse him when he ran as a Democrat. But I didn't endorse the Democrat either, who was running against him last time. But I think that on Beacon Hill, a lot of the partisan stuff is put aside most of the time. When the governor takes a position, very often it's partisan with the Speaker or the Senate President. But for the average person out there, I think that you've got to have your eyes open and just kind of do what you think is the right thing, and not so much what the political thing is or what the partisan thing to do is. I think people don't really care about that a lot. So I didn't have a hard time working with Paul Cellucci or Bill Weld or Jane Swift. I got along well with Mike Dukakis too. It didn't really matter who the governor was or the party, so much, I don't think. Once they're in, you got to work with people.
So do you ever reflect on
where
you are now?
Sure, yeah. I'm sure for them it was I'm very lucky, I know that. We were brought up, our parents were there, and they gave us a great education. We had a great family life. There was a lot of love there, and that made all the difference. We all went to good schools. We had advantages that my grandparents never had, on either side of the family, in terms of education and the ability to provide for ourselves. For us, for most of us, I think it really hasn't been a struggle, and that's it's a credit to my parents and my grandparents. Tough thing to set out and establish a home someplace where you don't know anyone, and maybe you don't even speak the language. People wouldn't think of doing that, but back then it was fairly commonplace with Protestant. How's that? No, I don't. I don't know.
Well, that's all right. Marie married someone with no faith, an extremely good man. Don't misunderstand him. But I mean, he's happy and she has beautiful children. So, that in those days, my parents probably would have been shocked by it. But I mean, we're not today. And I think one of the big differences is outside the religious aspect of it, but my graduating class at Holy Cross in 1951, 90% of the fellows in that class went into the service. 90%. Now, I think that's an extremely high percentage. And also that you had handicapped people in the class that were physically unable to go into the service and things like that, or the number of fellows that went into the seminary and so forth. Today, I think you have some patriotism around because of that September 11 incident, but people just don't look at it the same way today as they did going to Canada to avoid going into the service. Whereas had the draft there during the Vietnam War, you had any number of people that were. So there are changes in the world. There's no question about that.
Fortunately, I am. I think you've covered it pretty well.
Continuation of the interview, the senator had to leave, and I have just one more question for Attilio, and that is, what does it mean to be an Italian?
Oh, gosh, what's it mean? When you talk about Italian people, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the warmth. It comes from the people for me. I think they generally love other people They definitely, most definitely, are strong believers in family. And Italian mothers, don't cross them with their children because no telling what would happen. There is a great love of the children in Italian families. There's strong family feelings. I grew up with strong family feelings. Every week there was never any great period of time when we didn't see our grandparents. Fortunately, that was just on my mother's side because father, I'm just happy. I enjoy it. I feel for life. Go to an Italian wedding, you're going to have fun. There's no question about that. Like a party, they like to eat and drink. And they're warm people, and I've enjoyed it.
Hope for your children.
Well, I hope that my wife and I have gotten along extremely well. And we've lived 5 years together now. Well, we'll be in July. And we've had 6 children, and happy. I would hope that they would have the same happiness that we had. But as I say, unfortunately, it's a different world out there. We intended to have as many children as the good Lord sent us, and He sent us 6. And we've been very happy with that. I think I have 2 daughters that have children. Most of them today, and they're running around that everybody does today. Just a frantic pace out there now. That fortunately, boxes that everybody wants, the new cars, and so they're cheating themselves in some form. But that's their decision, and they do what they have to do. My wife didn't work when the children were older. She used to help me out in the office and so forth. But it was the same with my brother. His wife works the children at home. She took care of the home, and husband is my wife took care of me. And
to take care of each other?
Yeah, take care of each other and take care of your family, and that was the important thing. Yeah. That's about it. Oh, I think you've covered everything. I'm sure I'll think of 1,000 things after you've gone.
You can certainly call.
But no, I'm as I say, as far as I've been very happy being Italian. I've grown up with a lot of wonderful people and workers, and my cousins. They are the Ballerin sisters. They're both doctors and so forth. Their parents worked extremely hard. Pia, and then she had the bakery there. They get up at 3. We've taken several trips to Italy now, and we've been friendly to us. Always been warm. And
your ancestral village?
Oh yes, as a matter of fact, last fall. Last fall we were there with a trip to the Lakes region in northern Italy, and then we went to the house that my mother was born in Ravenna Largo, in it's Royal Mountains there. They lived in what they call the castle. It was a castle. I think it was 40 off of a big hill in the center of the town. Still lives there. 1,700 years old. And, last fall. My wife and I have been there before, but this is with the rest of the family.
Did you ever meet any of your cousins?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I've met many of them. Very hospitable to us when we went there last fall and so forth, having dinner. And they've come here and they've stayed at my mother's house. And,
generally speaking, how are they different as far as lifestyle?
Well, I think the only difference is they don't go to the malls like we do all the time. There because it's not in the large cities. They're working. They have decent job. Some of them have done very well for themselves and are well dressed, and they all appear to eat well in city life. Even I'm sure that if you go up into New Hampshire from here, the people in some of those small towns live differently than we do here in Leominster.
Interesting.
I think so.
No?
No.
Okay, well, thank you very much.